Molly said, I'm Ray Smith, and I'm the Stewardship Chair for Emmanuel. This year we decided to do our stewardship emphasis during Lent. And since I've asked others to give temple talks about stewardship during Lent, I thought it was only fair that I do one too.
I'm going to put this up.
Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. Oh, that's much better. During Lent, we typically contemplate Christ giving himself for us on the cross. This Lent, because of our stewardship emphasis, we also reflect on how we respond in gratitude for Christ's gift with our own gifts of charity, service, devotion, and prayer. As you know from the stewardship packet that you received with the Lenten devotional inside, this year's stewardship focus is about being found faithful. Being found faithful in a little, being found faithful with much, and being ultimately found faithful with all the gifts that God has given us. This past year, and so far this year, our little corner of the world has been turned upside down by the pandemic. We have been unable to come to church and worship as we normally would. Our typical meetings, gatherings, dinners, Bible and book studies, workshops, and every other communal activity has either been canceled, changed, done virtually, or done at great distance wearing masks. Our our stewardship of God's gifts, the use of our time, talents, and treasures that God has given us has had to change too, in order for us to continue to be found faithful stewards. For example, before the pandemic, I came to church here in this building each Sunday. I brought my offering to God and placed it in the offering plate. It was important to me to be present and to present my tithe as part of my Sunday worship. With the pandemic, those meaningful parts of Sunday were out. I couldn't come to church. I couldn't personally give my gift. I had to adapt in order to continue to be faithful in responding to Christ's gift on the cross. So Tootie and I participated in church on the computer. New thing for me. We mailed and then eventually sent our offerings in electronically. A very new thing for me. Doing this was very difficult for me. Anything involved in the computer is difficult for me. Tootie can attest to that. In order to be found faithful, we also had to have committee meetings and church councils done via Zoom or some other thing on the computer. Holding meetings via computer was less difficult for me, but I still missed the personal touch. In order to continue to be faithful, giving tree gifts, tithing made visual food gifts, among other things, were given carefully, wearing masks when no one was around, and instead of in a joyful act of fellowship and Christian community, we had to almost sneak it in. And I'm sure this was the same for all of you. In reading our Lenten stewardship devotions, make sure I've got this up right, and looking over all that we did this past year, it is clear to me that Emmanuel's members did not stop being faithful stewards of God's gift just because we could not meet together as we had in the past. It was tough, but instead we adapted to the situation so that we could continue to be found faithful stewards of God's gifts. We continued to show our love of God through worship and music, sometimes online, sometimes a few people in place here. We continued to form faith-filled followers. We continued to care for each other, creating community and connection through the computer, on the telephone. We continue to transform lives through mission and service. I am so proud of all that we did, even in the face of the pandemic. If we could do all this in the pandemic year of 2020, I am sure that we could do, give, and be so much more as we come out of the pandemic in 2021 and beyond. So here's my challenge for all of us. Think back to 2019. Now compare it to I said 2019. Okay, make sure I didn't say 1920. Now compare it to 2020. In comparison of those 2 years, find something that you were unable to do, unable to give, or unable to be in 2020. I'll wait a moment for you to think. For example, what something were you unable to do in 2020? What something were you unable to do in 2020 to thank God? What something were you unable to give in 2020? What something were you unable to give in 2020 to thank God? What kind of person were you unable to be in 2020? Could be something small, or it could be something very big and important. What did we lose in 2020? Now, in order to be better stewards of all of God's gifts in 2021, let's find a way to do it, give it, or be it in 2021 that we couldn't in 2020. And then even surpass that next year in 2022. Because if we can make it through 2020 as good stewards of God's gifts, then it is clear to me that we can be even better stewards in the years to come. Thank you for all that you have and will do. Amen.